The desert stretched endlessly, bathed in the orange glow of a setting sun. Dust swirled in the dry air as the outpost stood silent, save for the distant hum of alien machinery. It had been 5 years since the Zhyrillians arrived on Earth, their sleek vessels cutting through the skies like celestial spears. The treaty between their kind and humans was still fragile, built on uneasy cooperation. Yet, for all the political tension, on the ground, soldiers and workers of both species had found a way to coexist, bound by necessity. Lyra adjusted the visor over her silver eyes, scanning the excavation site ahead. Her squad was spread out, their elongated forms moving with eerie grace as they manipulated tools far beyond human comprehension. The desert soil was stubborn, but beneath it lay something invaluable, a mineral vital to both human and Zhyrillian technology, a resource worth the uneasy alliance. A gust of wind kicked up sand, and Lyra turned her head slightly as a human walked past. His kind fascinated her, their movements so clumsy yet determined, their bodies fragile yet resilient. She had spent enough time around them to distinguish the differences, those who feared her, those who tolerated her, and those who barely noticed her at all. This one, however, caught her attention for a different reason. Dr. Vitoris Caden. He wasn't a soldier, nor a miner. He was a medic, assigned to oversee the health of both species in the grueling conditions of the excavation. While other humans hesitated around the Zhyrillians, Vitoris never showed discomfort. He observed them with curiosity, treating them as he would his own kind. That intrigued Lyra, though she would never admit it aloud. He caught her staring. "Something wrong?" he asked, his voice calm, steady. Lyra scoffed, shifting her gaze back to the excavation site. "Not at all, human." He smirked but said nothing more, returning to his work. The moment passed, insignificant in the grand scheme of things. But Lyra would remember it. The explosion was sudden. A deafening roar split the air, and the ground beneath Lyra cracked with violent force. The shockwave lifted her, hurling her through the air before she slammed into the ground. Pain lanced through her body, her senses momentarily disoriented. Smoke and dust filled her lungs as she struggled to push herself up, but something was wrong. Something was missing. Her leg. She turned her head, her vision swimming, and saw the twisted remnants of her synthetic limb lying several meters away. The once sleek metal was torn apart, wires sparking weakly. Panic surged in her chest, but she forced it down. Zhyrillians were trained to endure, to adapt. She wouldn't allow herself to succumb to fear. Shouts echoed around her. Human voices, Zhyrillian voices. Chaos reigned. Lyra grit her teeth, pressing her hands into the dirt, attempting to drag herself forward. She would not be helpless. She refused to be. But before she could make it far, strong hands grasped her shoulders. "Stay still," a familiar voice ordered. "Vitoris." She glared up at him. "I can." "No, you can't," he interrupted, his tone firm but not unkind. His hands, warm against her cooler skin, pressed her back down gently. "Let me help." She should have resisted, should have shoved him away, but the pain was intensifying, her body trembling with the effort of keeping herself conscious. Her pride screamed at her to deny him, but logic told her otherwise. She let him work. He moved with efficiency, assessing the wound with practiced hands. Blood, or what passed for blood in her species, was seeping from the torn attachment point. The exposed nerves in her upper thigh crackled faintly with disrupted energy, sending erratic pulses of pain through her body. "This isn't good," he muttered, already reaching for his medical kit. "You're losing too much energy." Lyra forced out a breath. "I'll survive." Vitoris glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Not if I don't stabilize you." He worked quickly, using a combination of human and Zhyrillian medical equipment. She watched him through half-lidded eyes, fascinated despite herself. Humans were so persistent. She had always viewed their technology as primitive compared to her own, but here he was, bridging the gap between their two species with skilled hands and sheer determination. The sounds of battle, or whatever remained of it, faded into the background. Lyra focused only on him. The way his brow furrowed in concentration. The way his fingers moved with precision. The way he didn't hesitate to touch her, even when so many others of his kind recoiled at the idea. Her people would not approve of this. A human tending to a Zhyrillian with such care? It was almost unthinkable. But she didn't care. She must have lost consciousness for a moment because the next thing she knew, she was being lifted. The sensation was foreign, unsettling. Zhyrillians did not often carry one another. To be lifted by a human, it was almost humiliating. Almost. "Put me down," she growled weakly. Vitoris chuckled. Not happening. The journey back to the base was a blur. The pain dulled slightly, whether from the medical patches he had applied or from sheer exhaustion, she wasn't sure. All she knew was that when she finally woke again, she was in a sterile white room, lying on a medical bed far too comfortable for a military base. She turned her head and found Vitoris seated nearby, reviewing data on a holoscreen. He looked up the moment she stirred. "You're awake," he observed. Lyra swallowed, her throat dry. "Unfortunately," he smirked. "I'll take that as a thank you." She scowled but didn't argue. Instead, she shifted slightly, feeling the absence of her leg more acutely now. A wave of frustration crashed over her. To be crippled, even temporarily, was a disgrace among her people. Vitoris seemed to sense her thoughts because he set the holoscreen aside and leaned forward slightly. "You're going to be fine," he assured her. "The prosthetic can be replaced." Lyra scoffed. "Not by your technology." His lips quirked. "You'd be surprised." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He hesitated for only a moment before tapping a command on his holoscreen. A projection flickered to life, displaying a sleek, advanced synthetic limb. Not Zhyrillian, not human, something else, something new. "I've been working on this for a while," he admitted. "An experimental design, a hybrid between our technologies. Stronger, more adaptive." His gaze met hers. "I can build it for you." Lyra stared at the projection, her mind racing. The implications of this were enormous. A prosthetic not bound by the limitations of either species? It was unheard of. If word got out, it could change everything. Her gaze flicked back to him. "And why would you do this for me, human?" Vitoris held her stare, his expression unreadable for a long moment. Then, finally, he said, "Because I don't see you as just a Zhyrillian. I see you as someone worth saving." Her breath caught, a foreign warmth settling in her chest. She did not know what to make of this man, this human who defied expectations at every turn. But for the first time in a long time, she was willing to find out. "You said." The rhythmic beeping of the medical monitors was the first thing Lyra became aware of. It was an oddly human sound, something absent from the quiet efficiency of Zhyrillian medical technology. To her, it felt almost primitive, like a species clinging to something outdated, yet comforting in its own way. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled the room, mingling with the faint metallic tang of the synthetic components that had been used to patch up what remained of her leg. She turned her head and found Vitoris seated near the edge of her bed, his holoscreen casting a soft blue glow over his face. He was studying something intently, brows slightly furrowed, unaware that she was watching him. His human features were so different from her own species, rougher, more angular, but she had to admit, there was something about him that drew her gaze more than it should. "You're staring," he murmured without looking up. Lyra scoffed, shifting slightly on the bed. "Hardly. I was observing." Vitoris finally lifted his eyes from the screen, a small smirk playing at his lips. "And what's the difference?" "Observation is for study," she replied. "Staring is a sign of fascination." His smirk deepened. "So you're studying me, then?" She narrowed her eyes but said nothing. He had a way of twisting words, of playing with them in a manner that unsettled her. There was something about humans and their need to fill silence with conversation, as if they feared the absence of sound. Zhyrillians were different. Silence was a language of its own. "You should be resting," he said, setting the holoscreen aside. "Your body is still adjusting to the trauma." Lyra glanced down at what remained of her leg. The exposed attachment site was covered in regenerative gel, faint blue sparks of energy still flickering where severed nerves attempted to reconnect. The loss of her old prosthetic still stung, not just physically but mentally. A Zhyrillian warrior was never meant to be weak, never meant to be helpless. "I don't need rest," she muttered, her voice laced with quiet frustration. Vitoris leaned forward slightly. "You do if you want your body to accept the new prosthetic." She frowned. "You assume I will accept it." His expression didn't shift. "You will." His confidence irritated her. But the worst part was he wasn't wrong. She needed a leg. There was no pride in being crippled, no honor in refusing aid that could return her to her full strength. But to allow a human to be the one to rebuild her, that was something she was still struggling to accept. He stood, walking toward the far end of the room where a small workstation had been set up. His fingers moved across the controls of a fabrication device, and soon, a holographic blueprint flickered to life above the table. Lyra tilted her head slightly, observing the sleek design of the synthetic limb. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. The architecture was neither purely human nor Zhyrillian. The material composition was strange, lightweight yet impossibly strong. The joints were more flexible than standard prosthetics, designed to adapt to motion seamlessly. And then there were the nerve connections, something Vitoris had clearly engineered to synchronize perfectly with both biological and synthetic signals. It was impressive. "You made this?" she asked, unable to keep the curiosity from her voice. Vitoris turned, arms crossing over his chest. "It's based on research I've been working on for a while. A fusion of our technology. Something better than what either of our species could create alone." Lyra studied him for a long moment. "Why?" His gaze held hers, unreadable. "Because I can." That answer unsettled her. Humans were strange creatures, driven by things that weren't always logical. Zhyrillians pursued progress for the advancement of their people, for efficiency, for necessity. But humans created simply because they wanted to, because they could, because they dreamed of things beyond their immediate needs. It was both fascinating and foolish. And yet, she could not deny the brilliance in his work. She exhaled slowly. "When will it be ready?" "A day, maybe two," Vitoris replied. "The integration process will take longer, though. You'll need to learn how to use it." She bristled slightly. "I know how to use a prosthetic." "Not this one," he countered. "This isn't just a replacement for what you lost. It's an upgrade. You'll have more control, more adaptability. But that also means retraining your mind to work with it." Lyra considered this. She hated the idea of being dependent on anyone, least of all a human. But she wasn't a fool. If this technology was truly superior to what she had before, she would be a fool not to take advantage of it. Finally, she nodded. "Fine. I'll do what's necessary." Vitoris smiled slightly, as if he had expected nothing less. "Good." Silence stretched between them again, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was something else. A quiet understanding. An unspoken acknowledgement that, despite their differences, they were both walking a path neither had expected. For a long time, Lyra simply watched him work. His hands moved with precision, adjusting the intricate details of the prosthetic's design. She had seen many human engineers before, but none like him. Most approached their work with either arrogance or cold calculation. But Vitoris? He treated his craft like an art form, as if every piece of the limb mattered beyond its function. She wasn't sure why, but she found herself speaking before she could stop herself. "You're different from the others." Vitoris paused, glancing at her with mild curiosity. "What do you mean?" "The other humans I've met," she clarified. "They fear us, or they tolerate us out of obligation. But you seem to actually care." His expression shifted slightly, something unreadable flashing behind his eyes. "I do care." "Why?" she pressed. He hesitated before answering. "Because I don't see you as just a Zhyrillian. I see you as a person." The words settled in the air between them, heavier than she expected. No human had ever spoken to her like that before. To them, she was either an ally or an adversary, never something in between. Never just a person. She wasn't sure how to respond to that, so she didn't. Instead, she simply lay back against the bed, staring at the ceiling as she processed everything. Her injury, her future, and the human who, for reasons she couldn't yet understand, saw her as something more than just an alien in need of repair. Vitoris returned to his work, but the quiet between them no longer felt like a barrier. It felt like the beginning of something neither of them had anticipated. You said. The prosthetic lay before her, gleaming under the sterile medical lights. Lyra studied it carefully, running her fingers over the smooth, intricate plating. It was unlike any limb she had ever seen. Neither purely Zhyrillian nor entirely human. It was something else. Something new. Vitoris stood beside her, arms crossed, watching her reaction. He had spent the last 2 days perfecting the final modifications, barely resting as he ensured the prosthetic was flawless. There was a confidence in his posture, but beneath it, she sensed something else. Anticipation, perhaps? Uncertainty? It's ready, he said simply. Lyra nodded once. Then let's begin. She expected the attachment process to be painful, and in a way it was, but not in the way she anticipated. The physical discomfort was secondary to something deeper, something she couldn't quite define. She had worn prosthetics before, but this was different. As Vitoris connected the nerve relays, a strange warmth spread through her body, like the limb wasn't just replacing what she had lost, but becoming a true part of her. She clenched her jaw as the integration process initiated, energy surging through the connection point. The prosthetic came alive, adjusting to her nervous system, syncing with her neural pathways. Her fingers tightened against the side of the medical bed as she let out a slow, steady breath. Vitoris was watching her closely. How does it feel? Lyra flexed the new limb, testing the motion. It was smooth, impossibly fluid, as if it had always been hers. She curled her toes, an action she had never been able to do with her previous prosthetic. The sensation was unnerving, almost too natural. Strange, she admitted. His lips quirked slightly. Good strange or bad strange? Lyra hesitated before answering. I don't know yet. He nodded as if he had expected that response. Take your time. Your body needs to adjust. But she didn't want to take her time. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, testing her balance as she stood. The prosthetic carried her weight effortlessly, responding to her every move without hesitation. It was as if it anticipated her steps before she even made them. Vitoris stepped forward slightly, his hands hovering near her as if ready to catch her should she falter. The gesture irritated her. I don't need your help, she said, shooting him a look. I know, he replied, but he didn't step back. She took a slow step forward, then another. The limb moved flawlessly, no lag, no hesitation. Her previous prosthetic, even at its best, had always required micro-adjustments. But this was something beyond technology. It was instinctive. She stopped, glancing down at it. This is remarkable. Vitoris exhaled, his expression shifting into something almost relieved. I'm glad you think so. Lyra turned her gaze back to him, studying him carefully. This is more than just engineering, isn't it? He hesitated, then sighed. No, it's not. She frowned slightly. Then what is it? Vitoris was quiet for a moment before he finally said, It's proof. Of what? That we don't have to be as different as we think. Lyra wasn't sure how to respond to that. She had spent her life viewing humans as something apart, something other. Even those she worked alongside had always remained distant. But Vitoris, he blurred that line in a way that unsettled her. She flexed the new limb again, testing the sensation once more. It was flawless, but the thought that lingered in her mind had nothing to do with the prosthetic. It had everything to do with the man who had built it. The desert wind was cool against her skin as Lyra stepped outside for the first time in days. The excavation site had been temporarily shut down, the mine explosion forcing a reassessment of safety protocols. That suited her fine. She needed space, time to think. Footsteps approached from behind. She knew who it was before he spoke. "You're walking better than I expected," Vitoris observed. Lyra didn't turn to face him. "You sound surprised." "Not surprised," he said, stepping up beside her. "Just impressed." She glanced at him out of the corner of her eye. "You made the prosthetic. Shouldn't you already know how well it would function?" He smirked. "Engineering is predictable. People aren't." She let that thought settle between them before turning her gaze back to the horizon. The stars were just beginning to appear, scattered across the darkening sky like tiny, distant beacons. Zhyrillians didn't assign sentimental value to such things, but humans saw meaning in everything. "You said this prosthetic is proof," she murmured. "Proof of what exactly?" Vitoris was silent for a moment. Then, finally, he said, "That we can build something better together." She looked at him fully then, searching his face. Humans were so expressive, their emotions written plainly across their features. There was no deception in his words, no ulterior motive, just honesty. Something in her chest tightened. "This is dangerous thinking," she said, her voice quieter than she intended. He chuckled softly. "Only if we let it be." Lyra wasn't sure how to respond. For the first time in her life, she felt unmoored, uncertain. She had always known where she stood in the world, what her purpose was. But Vitoris had changed something, and she wasn't sure she wanted to change it back. She took a slow step forward, testing the strength of her new leg against the uneven terrain. The desert stretched out before her, vast and endless. For the first time in a long time, she wondered what lay beyond it. "You said." Lyra stood at the edge of the outpost, her synthetic leg humming softly with each step. It had been weeks since the operation, and the limb had become as much a part of her as the flesh and bone she had lost. There were no delays in movement, no awkward adjustments, only pure, seamless motion. She had been given clearance to return to active duty, but something kept her here, on this human-occupied stretch of land. She told herself it was to oversee the final tests on her prosthetic, but she knew that wasn't the truth. Vitoris was nearby, working at his makeshift lab beneath the open sky. The humans had set up temporary structures, but he preferred the open air, claiming the desert gave him space to think. He had offered her another round of system recalibrations, but she had refused. The prosthetic worked fine. It was her mind that felt unbalanced. She approached him, watching as he meticulously adjusted the settings on a new project, some kind of hybrid technology she didn't yet recognize. His focus was absolute, his hands steady. "You never stop working," she observed. Vitoris didn't look up. "Innovation doesn't wait." Lyra folded her arms, tilting her head slightly. "And what exactly are you trying to innovate now?" "Something better," he said simply. She exhaled through her nose, amused. "You always say that." He finally glanced up, meeting her gaze. "Because it's always true." She held his stare, searching for the thing that had been gnawing at her since the moment he had first offered to help her. She had spent so long believing humans and Zhyrillians could never truly coexist, that their cooperation was only ever a matter of necessity. Yet, here she stood, her very existence proof that such an idea was flawed. "Why did you do it?" she asked, her voice quieter than before. Vitoris frowned slightly. "Do what?" "Help me," she clarified. "Even when your own people hesitated." His expression shifted, softening in a way that unsettled her more than any battle ever had. He leaned back slightly, setting his tools aside. "Because I saw someone who deserved better." Her chest tightened. "That's not a logical reason." "No," he admitted. "It's a human one." Silence stretched between them. The wind stirred the sand around them, carrying the distant sounds of the outpost as the evening settled in. She wanted to challenge his words, to tell him that sentimentality had no place in war or survival. But she couldn't, because despite all the logic she had relied on her entire life, there was an undeniable truth in what he said. She was more than a soldier, more than an alien. She was a person, And somehow, despite all the differences between them, he had seen that before she had. She took a step closer, the motion effortless, weightless. And what do you think happens now? Vitoris studied her, his gaze holding something deeper than curiosity, something unspoken. I think that's up to you. For the first time in a long time, Lyra didn't have an answer. But for the first time, she didn't need one. The stars above shone brightly, scattered across the vast, endless sky. And for the first time, she allowed herself to wonder what it would be like to reach for them, together.